Hello everyone, as you may know by now, my name is Luke Seha and welcome to my ethnography story. As many of you have already seen, this is my leadership story, a little bit about me, and I know many of you have already read this. So if you would like to take another look, go ahead and pause and read some of the facts. But if not, I am going to go on to my next slide. Now on to what does my name mean? So as you may know, my name is Luke Seha and my middle name is actually Benjamin. Starting off with Luke, I know that Luke, everybody may know that Luke is from the Bible, but I wanted to do a little more digging and I found out that the name Luke actually means light giving. It is a shortened version of the Latin name Lucas, which is derived from the Greek name Lucas. And a lot of people like to mistake me for Lucas or think Luke is short for it, but I am just plain old Luke, no Lucas. And it was really interesting to see that my name was light giving because as a child, I remember having a keychain each of my siblings had with our names on it, and mine mentioned light giving, so that's just a cool little fun fact. My middle name, Benjamin, is actually from my mom's brother, my Uncle Benjamin. I was named after him, but I also did some more digging on this, and I found that the meaning of Benjamin is the son of the right hand in Hebrew. It stems from bin Yamin, where bin translates to son, and Yamin translates to the right hand or right side. And I also found out that the phrase the Benjamin of the family refers to the youngest child in the family, just as Benjamin is the youngest son of Jacob from the Bible. I found this to be so intriguing because I am the youngest of my family. So just a little coinkydink there. And my last name, Seha, has my whole life it's always been special to me. I love my last name, but as in meaning wise, Seha in Spanish means eyebrow. So it has never meant nothing crazy to me, but after some digging, I did find that the name Seha has Arabian connections because in Arab it means courageous, and in Arab the name Ashja was later converted to Seha through Christian and Latin influence. And that kind of blew my mind because I've only ever known Seha to mean eyebrow, so that was a really cool fun fact. Now that I've talked a little bit about my family, I wanted to just give a really quick family tree because if I were to do a full family tree, I would need a couple slides to put that on because my dad comes from a family of 8 and my mom comes from a family of 7, I believe. And yeah, all my aunts and uncles, they've each had lots of children as well. So there's, just a lot of different vines on my family tree. So this is my shortened version. Here on the left side, you can see Della and Paul. That is my grandma and grandpa from my mom's side. They had my mom. And then on my right side, you can see Isabel and Jose, which are my grandma and grandpa. On my dad's side, they had my dad Frank, and my mom and dad had, it's a little out of order, but they first had my sister Isabella, my brother Jake, my second sister Michaela, and then me, the youngest, Luke. And one last member of our family that was just recently introduced was my niece Bella. She is awesome. She is such a cutie pie, and she's our first grandbaby. So we have, you can imagine we were so excited to have her. And this is just a little shortened version, so you guys get just a little bit of understanding of where I'm coming from my own family tree. Now to talk about some similarities and differences between my parents' generation and my generation. To start off, the means of transportation and technology. Because nowadays everybody has a car. Everybody has an iPhone. Everybody has a computer, a laptop, an iPad, and all these different technological things. Whereas back then, when talking to my parents about it too, there was either walking, not as many cars on the road, but there was lots of walking and taking the bus. And they also had no phone. They maybe had, when they were in college, they probably had a brick phone, that you could call somebody with. But besides that, the only kind of technology they had was, the calculator coming out and the first computers. Another thing is importance of education and really the unimportance for them. Because back then, you can learn a trade and go into so many different professions just based on your knowledge and what you're able to do. Whereas nowadays, you need a degree to work a job. You have to go to college and get your certification and get a degree in order to be in the higher aspects of the workforce. Whereas back then, it wasn't as strict and education wasn't as really much important. Another one is the home ownership and financial goals. Back then, a lot of our parents were buying houses at a much younger age because of how much land was available and just how much lower of a cost it was. Whereas nowadays, I know kids my age right now are definitely not looking to buy a house that is 400, 500,000 and above because that is what most of the market is looking at. And another reason why a lot of kids in my generation either rent or live in small apartments. And for my differences, it's just ways of entertainment and how free time is spent. Nowadays, a lot of kids are kept inside rather than playing, outside. Whereas my parents' generation, that's all they could do was play outside. And nowadays we can stay inside, watch TV, play on our iPad, play video games, just so many different more ways to keep us entertained. A big difference I wanted to go over was social norms and identity because I know for the older generation this was a big shock to them. Because I grew up with it, it was normal to me, but to the older generation, like my dad, who is a teacher in high school, he asked his students to help him understand because he wants to be able to understand and be familiar with it and familiar with how to be respectful of different social norms and identities. But it's just something that's foreign to him because he's didn't grow up with it and was something that was not seen at his time. So as for similarities, number one is love for music and entertainment. I know that my generation, we value music so much. You will always find someone in classrooms with wanting to listen to music and put their headphones on, put their earbuds in, and just jam out to whatever song they like. And because music makes them feel something. And I have noticed the same with that for the older generation. With there's just so many different genres of R&B, soul music, and that's when rock and roll was also becoming a big thing. And that music means so much to them as well. Like what they played in the car every day. And I know my parents did, and I grew up on their music, so I know just how much that type of music means to them. Number two is technology adaptation, because although we had different advances in technology, there was still advances. And just as we have gone to adapting with AI, smartphones, and smart products, my parents were adapting with brand new computers, cell phones, and even the calculator, which I thought was just something crazy to think about. And number three is family importance. Both generations value family and frame that family is key. Family is number one, and they always make time to keep family close and together. Now, I did want to talk about, as I mentioned earlier, my interview that I had with my dad. I interviewed him a couple of days ago, and it was just such a genuine and awesome conversation because I feel like I asked my dad questions about his history all the time, but to be able to do it in a formal format was really sincere. And I think he appreciated it as well because I know that he has probably done this before, but to have it from his own son, I know it probably meant a lot. I just wanted to share kind of the beginning of it just to give you an insight on how he grew up. I asked him to introduce himself, and his name is Frank Reyes Ceja. He was born in Coachella, California in 1964. And just a side note, I've lived here in the Coachella Valley my whole life. So he was born here and has lived out his whole life here. I asked him about his ethnicity, just a clarifying question for everybody, and the effect that it had on him growing up. Just a little bit to get some insight on his life. He, this was his answer. He said, I am Hispanic. My family comes from small towns in Mexico, Lagos de Moreno, Jalisco, and Tocumbo, Michoacan. His heritage was very hardworking, and he inherited the same trait from them. His father came for work in the fields to help combat labor shortages caused by World War II. This was actually called the Bracero program. And the day I learned about it in my history class and came back and told my dad about it, he had mentioned that my grandpa was a part of that, and I could not believe it. This big historical program that I just learned about in class, my grandpa was a part of, and that just made me feel so proud. Back to his answer, by the way. His mom also worked in the fields as my grandpa did, and also in a factory. He was from a family of 8. And no, they were not rich by any means, just as most of the Coachella community was. And he worked there. His parents worked their butts off every day to provide a better life for his siblings and him. This was just really inspiring to hear about because to know I come from such a hardworking family. I never got to meet my grandma and grandpa, but I've only ever heard stories and asked my dad about them so many times. And so this is really interesting to see this side of my heritage because I am proud of my culture and where I come from. And I really love just getting to know a little bit more about my dad and how he grew up because I know that he had his hardships growing up as a brown Mexican in the United States. But because he comes from a hardworking family, he did all he could and worked so hard for his parents and his family and now for my siblings and I, which is how we got to where we are today. Next, now I want to go into the history of Mexicans, of my culture in the United States. I didn't want to go back too far, so I went back to the 1940 and 1960s, where there was labor shortages and the Bracero program came in effect. This is really when we had a big boom of the Hispanic culture coming over to the United States. Because as you can see from this little newspaper snippet, approximately 6,000 imported Mexican workers came from just the month of October to help with the labor shortages, and my grandpa was a part of that. This is really when the population started to grow a little bit. In the 1960s through 80s is when the civil rights and Chicano movements happened. This is the movements with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta, where they led the United Farm Workers movement for labor rights, better wages, and better working conditions. The Chicano movement was also a movement with Mexican Americans fighting for civil rights, bilingual education, and political representation. Now that they kind of established their population, there was still a lot of divide between them and the other cultures in the nation. It made it harder for them to get an education and made it harder to get an equal pay for a good day's work because all the workers that they were importing, like my grandpa, were mostly going to the fields and they were not working in good condition and not getting enough pay to support their families. So these movements played such a big part in my history, my community, and in my culture for fighting for educational rights and equal pay rights. And my culture would not be where it is today if these never happened. In 1980 through 2000 is when our population really started growing because the population that came before, they started having their their childs and all their families were growing and growing, and as a result there were a lot of immigration challenges because they wanted to make it harder for immigrants to get health care and just make it a little bit harder to live here in the United States. As in, one of the big things was the California Proposition 187, I believe it is, where they try to make it harder for them to get health care and to get help like that. And as you can see, the photo I chose is students protesting against 187, because a lot of their parents were the ones being affected by it. So now that they have established their population, they were struggling because they were kind of getting fought against and just making it harder for them to live and their social progress. But they started finally to move up, which leads us to the 2000s and to now, the present, the 2020s. There's been a big immigration shift with lots of immigrants migrating over to the US, and there's just been a huge culture and economic impact. As you can see, and a rising influence, as you can see that photo below, the tax contributions by undocumented immigrants in 2022 was 96.7 billion, and that was just by undocumented. There is 100 billion more from documented immigrants and all the different Hispanic cultures and families that are contributing in the US. This is a this was a really cool little research project I got to do just to know more about my culture and their history. Now moving on to making America a better place and a home for my family. My family has been involved in education, agriculture, military, community service, and me and my family have planted our seeds all over the US. So I have family in different states, different cities, and all over. I am just so proud of to look back and see all of what my family has done, knowing that my grandpa and my uncle have served in the military, that my cousins, my mom and dad, my aunts and uncles were all in education teaching the next generations for the country, and in agriculture to know that my grandparents helped just really build the food community, at least within Coachella and throughout California, because of how long their food got shipped, and also the community service. I grew up with just loads of community service. I was getting hours every week, and I was involved in 3 different programs growing up of helping in my community, helping around schools, and that I think really shaped me who I am today. Being bicultural really does come with its benefits. Number one is being bilingual and speaking Spanish. I speak English and Spanish, and this not only helps in the workforce and with different jobs, but also in my community because I'm able to understand all of the Spanish speakers in my community, and I feel that I help give them a voice and help give them comfort because they know that someone else speaks the language. Another one is open-mindedness towards other cultures because coming from my own and how many different traditions we have, I am able to openly see the other traditions of other cultures as well. Number three is my relationship with community. As I mentioned, with being bilingual, it is just held me so close to my community and really being able to make connections with those within it. I've been able to know so much of my community based on my own culture and because I am a part of it with them. Number four is making me who I am. I feel that being bicultural has really shaped who I am today. I've attended Mexican leadership camps and Hispanic leadership camps, and it just really makes me proud. It has really shaped my hardworkingness and just who I want to be as a person. Last but not least, this is how I will make our world a better place. I wanted to put a photo of my graduation from Cal Baptist University because this photo means a lot to me. This photo is, a couple years of just hard work and dedication to get to where I am now. And where I am now is going into the greatest profession in the world, which is teaching. I hope to prepare the next generation of learners and just the next generation of our nation to be ready for any task that they may take. I want to have a classroom that prepares my kids to make a positive impact on every community, not just in our state, in our nation, but around the world. So thank you so much for watching my presentation. I know I went a little long, but I really enjoyed making this and learning more about not just my culture, but my family and about me. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.